Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My guest today is Mark Hawtin. Mark is an investment director and responsible for the global equity strategies at GAM. Welcome, Mark.
Well, thanks very much. Good to be on.
Mark, so today we want to discuss technology trends in Asia and disruptive technology. And let's start with China. China has shaken up the financial markets with a wave of regulatory measures, so mainly against internet stocks during the last couple of months. So how much has this changed the sector's growth prospects?
So I think on a fundamental basis, longer term, it hasn't really changed the growth prospects at all. But in the short term, it has created a great deal of uncertainty. So we have seen Chinese technology and disruptive equities hit very hard last year, particularly as measured by, for example, the US ADR, Chinese ADR index, which was down 50% last year. So within the segment as a whole, I think that the regulatory changes will cause different outcomes for different types of companies. So that creates a great opportunity, really, because what we've seen so far is everything being sold off, perhaps with the exception of one or two areas of the Chinese market that have got very clear government support, like electric vehicles, for example. But there are going to be companies and subsegments within the market that I think have huge return potential once the regulatory backdrop becomes clear.
Hi there. Just a 2-second break. Before we continue with the video, just make sure to subscribe to our channel now to not miss out any updates. Thank you very much and enjoy the video now.
So to what extent have these measures affected valuation of technology stocks in China? And how attractive is the internet sector with stocks like Alibaba, Tencent and Co nowadays?
So clearly, with the sell-off that we've seen, that's brought with it a significant reduction in valuation. So we've seen many of these big internet companies now in China trading on extremely attractive valuations optically. The question that we have to then assess is to what extent have the growth prospects of these companies on an individual basis been impaired or not? And therefore, to what extent are they cheap, or to what extent will we have to adjust our earnings expectations? But in general, as a generalization, many of these companies do look very cheap and will offer very interesting return potential going forward.
So this has raised a completely new question. So how much is the technology industry in China influenced by state intervention? And do investors need to reassess the issue of regulatory risks in China now?
Yes, but I think, to be fair, there was always a need to assess regulatory risk. You know, China is a balkanized internet economy. It is highly controlled. But at the same time, there's no real incentive for the Chinese authorities to completely stymie the opportunity and the growth of their sector. They have, for the first time, perhaps, and perhaps we'll discuss this later, they have created a positioning where perhaps China can lead the world market in the next generation of technology opportunities and innovation. So they don't want to destroy that, but they do want to make sure that it's very clear that they won't allow some of these very big, particularly consumer-facing internet companies, they won't allow them to have things entirely their own way.
So disruptive has become the new buzzword for technology companies. Everybody wants to be disruptive. So where do you draw the line between innovation and disruption?
So I think innovation creates disruption. So you need to innovate. And if you innovate successfully, you can then disrupt an existing market. So if I give you an example in China, the Chinese freight transportation market domestically is a $1 trillion a year market. The vast proportion of that market, whether it be within cities or intra-city or intra-region, is very archaic in terms of the way it is handled. So drivers with trucks will go to the center of the town. There'll be a specific meeting point. They'll meet brokers. Brokers will be carrying a list of potential jobs on blackboards, and they will take their jobs from those brokers. Now, by innovating, and we see innovation in the form of Uber-style apps for commercial trucking, it's possible to create a much more efficient way of doing that. By creating that efficiency, you then start to disrupt the traditional way in which the market has operated. So I would say that successful innovation then leads to and creates disruption.
So the impact of innovations in the future is difficult to assess. How do you identify sustainable long-term technology trends to invest in?
So that, I think, for me, is a very key part of the work that we do when we're running, essentially a disruptive growth product. It's as important, if not more important, to identify that long-term innovative and disruptive trend, and perhaps slightly easier than having identified the trend to identify the companies that represent that trend, or maybe the winners within that. So the way we do that really is to focus on a lot of industry research. We talk to a lot of industry experts. We'll spend probably as much time talking to industry specialists as we will to companies themselves. And we slowly formulate ideas about what trends are likely to be very substantial and growing rapidly over 5 and 10 years. In many ways, if you can find a trend which is going to be addressing a multi-tens or hundreds of billions of dollar market, and it's growing rapidly, then you take away some of the risk involved, in the sense that if the market actually isn't quite as large as that, or doesn't grow quite as quickly, you've still got a very large opportunity to aim at. And so we really are looking for the biggest growth trends within the markets globally, and then the best possible way to represent those in terms of the companies that we can invest in.
So let's name some of them: artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, robotics, Internet of Things, genomics, new energies. The range of new technologies is vast. And in which areas are Chinese and Asian companies well positioned?
So I think they're well positioned domestically in most of the areas that you've mentioned. The extent to which they will be able to push that beyond their own borders and become more global is going to depend on a lot of things, not just the quality of their technology. As you're well aware, there is a huge standoff between China and the West in terms of technology transmission and the potential for using technology as a next generation spying opportunity, in a sense. And so there's more at play than just the technology itself. But if we just look at the technology and the innovation going on within China, I think that we're entering what we call Digital 4, the fourth major wave of digital growth. We've gone from the mainframe era in the 70s to the client server era, where we had desktops wireline to each other, to the mobile era with the smartphones. And now we're in this fourth phase, which we call Digital 4, which is the connectivity of everything. So it actually embodies many of the areas that you mentioned just now. It embodies Internet of Things or Internet of Everything. It embodies data, AI, connectivity, the way that all these come together to create opportunity. And I think that the key, the new oil within that is data. Data is required as a critical component of company success in the future. Now, because China has the biggest installed base of IoT devices, the biggest installed base of smartphones, they're collecting more data than anyone. And that potentially puts them in the position to lead in the next wave, in this digital fourth wave, using AI, using the data that drives that AI to create highly innovative products, which will be world leading. Now, those can be used very substantially, and there are great markets within China itself. And then depending on the political backdrop, they may or may not be able to push further afield into international markets.
So this was Mark Hawtin, Investment Director at GAM. Thank you very much, Mark, for being with us today and sharing your insights.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It's been great.